Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of our Seven Investing podcast. I'm Seven Investing founder and CEO Simon Erickson. Very excited to talk today about virtual reality. It's been now 6.5 years since Facebook bought Oculus. So is VR finally ready for prime time? Well, to help us answer that question, I brought in a VR expert. Jan Goetgeluk is the founder and CEO of Virtuix out in Austin, Texas. He's going to share his experiences and his opinions on the world of virtual reality. Hey, Jan, thanks for joining Seven Investing.
Hey, Simon, thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
Jan, I've really enjoyed following your story at Virtuix. I know that you have 12 venture capitalists on board. Mark Cuban is an investor in your company. I've watched you on Mad Money with Kramer in the past. Congratulations on how everything's going. I know that the original perspective you had on VR and direction for your company was on the commercial opportunities, kind of these gaming centers around the world. Can you tell us a little bit about how that has played out in recent years?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. VR has followed an interesting path, and so have we as a company. We actually initially started out focused on the consumer markets, early days, 2012, 2013, lots of excitement. But VR has truly followed the Gartner hype cycle. If you're familiar with that curve, there was a lot of hype at a peak of the hype, and then the trough of disillusionment. Didn't work out as quickly as massively as people thought, but now VR is on this slope of enlightenment. So it's interesting how VR has followed that Gartner hype cycle to a T. We initially focused on the consumer market, but then, as you mentioned, those early years, consumer VR was slow to take off. So we pivoted to the commercial market. We started selling our product, which is an omnidirectional treadmill that lets you walk and run inside VR, inside video games and other applications. It's a wild experience. We started selling that to the commercial market, entertainment venues, VR arcades, which was a big phenomenon a few years ago. And then most recently, we also started selling a multiplayer configuration called Omni Arena to the higher end of the entertainment market, places like Dave & Buster's, Sky Zone, the big entertainment centers. And that's done really well. I think commercial VR, commercial entertainment has had a strong demand for VR, and VR has done well in that setting. People that visit those venues, they love the experience, they love trying VR. And that's been a big market for us in the last few years. But now for the first time, we are going back to the consumer market as well, with a new consumer product, because now consumer VR seems ready for prime time.
Yeah, and let's talk about that pivot a little bit, Jan, because I know that if you're selling to a commercial VR arcade or something, it's all about the payback period, the ROI. You're going after a different type of customer with the consumer. But it's got to be a lower price point. There's got to be different things that they're wanting. How are you approaching the consumer market for VR now?
Yeah, it's very different. And the reason we did that was, look, we've shipped now almost 4,000 Omni systems commercially to the entertainment market. We're in 45 countries, over 500 entertainment venues. And it's our customers, our players at those entertainment venues that start asking us, where can I buy this? When can I get this from my home? And that's what prompted us to start working on a consumer version of the Omni, actually taking us back to the original vision of the company. But it's very different. Games are different for the home than they are for the commercial market. Omni One, which is our home product that we announced a few weeks ago, is optimized for the home, lighter, cheaper, easy to fold up and store. And also the business model is different. We call it the Peloton for gamers, because it follows the Peloton business model, if you will. An upfront purchase price for the hardware, but then also recurring revenues from games, from content. Games we sell on our store, and monthly subscriptions for online gameplay, which is very common in the game industry. So it's a completely different animal than the commercial markets. But the commercial market in our case feeds nicely into the home market, because we have this out-of-home sales channel, thousands of systems in the commercial market. Hundreds of thousands of players, soon to be 1 million registered players. That's a great sales channel for our home product. So one market, the out-of-home commercial market, feeds nicely into our next market, which is the home. So one supports the other, which is quite nice.
Sure. And I know that the Omni is, like you said, the zero friction kind of, almost like, think of it as a treadmill, an omnidirectional treadmill that you're actually walking on. So you're getting the full experience and working out. when you're doing playing a VR game, which is very different than anything else I've seen out there. But if I recall, you're actually kind of, it doesn't matter you which headset is used. You're agnostic to whether you're using an Oculus or an HTC headset or a Samsung headset. I suppose that the majority of the revenue in the VR global market is from the headsets right now. Is it Facebook that's a step ahead of competitors, or who seems to be winning on the hardware side of this?
Definitely Facebook, especially on the consumer side. I have to say, Facebook is building an absolute monopoly on the consumer side of VR. They were the first ones to come out with this standalone headset. That's the big difference now compared to a few years ago. Is a standalone headset. You no longer need a gaming PC. Now you can play VR with just a headset. Everything works on the headset, so you don't need cables. You don't need a high-end performance PC. So that really is bringing VR to a mass market, not just that segment that has VR and gaming PCs at home. And that's how VR got started. That's no longer the case. And Facebook is absolutely dominating that market. And they just announced the Quest 2 $300 product, right? So they're heavily subsidizing the hardware. They're not, I'm speculating, but yeah, it's widely known that they're certainly not aiming to make a large margin on the hardware, on the upfront sale of the hardware. They aim to make that up with the selling content, selling games, and building that market share. It's very hard for anyone else to come into the consumer market with a headset and compete on that price point. And in fact, what we're seeing is no one else wants to do it. Other headset manufacturers like HTC and HP may also come out with a standalone headset, but they may focus more on the enterprise market because it's such a hard fight against Oculus, who has billions and billions of dollars, that they don't mind losing on upfront hardware sales. It's really hard to compete. So to your question, absolutely, Facebook is dominating the consumer side of VR, and it's looking like they will have very few competitors in that market.
Sure. And do you think, Jan, this is speculating, of course, at this point, but are we a couple of years out from a VR headset that's standalone and doesn't have the wires that you're talking about, being able to integrate with a smartphone? Will we be able to play VR games off of a smartphone with a VR headset on?
Well, that's a route that was explored a few years ago. Samsung, for example, had a Samsung Gear VR, where you take your phone, a Note 7 in that case, or a later version, and you could clip it into this holder, and that was your VR headset. That's no longer done. But the standalone VR headset is actually has all the components of a smartphone. If you look at a standalone VR headset, it has a screen, high resolution screen. It has a processor, and it has sensors. Basically, everything you find in a standalone VR headset, you can find in a smartphone. But the way of doing that by taking an actual smartphone and clipping it onto your face, that's out of fashion. That's no longer done. Companies now just bring out a standalone VR headset separately from any smartphone.
Sure. Okay. And then the consumer opportunity too, you were saying that, expectations of getting this lower price point into people's hands. This is not just a hardware sale. This is a platform that you can build off of. Mm-hmm. Are there opportunities outside of gaming that once someone has a headset and maybe has an Omni in their home, can you expand that into other opportunities too?
Yeah, if we look at, for example, back to Oculus, on the Oculus Store, the applications you can have on the Quest headset, it's more than gaming. It stretches to social experiences, meetup places where people go and meet up with other people. There's an application for virtual events where you meet up with friends and you go to a concert in VR. There's applications of watching sports live in VR, front row seats, again, social with other people. So VR is definitely more than gaming. And same for our platform. In Omni One, we will have our own game store and our own applications. And certainly gaming is our focus, because gaming is just a lot of fun, especially with the Omni, where you can literally walk and run around inside video games. But it's more than gaming. We will also integrate with those social applications where you can just hang out with friends and family. And in our case, you can actually also just walk around together or do things together. You don't have to just stand in place or sit on a chair. which is a limitation of just a headset. We have a much richer experience, if you will.
And are the gaming developers that you're working with, are these tend to be like the larger game companies that we know of, the Activision Blizzards of the world, or are they smaller, innovative, really progressive, VR-focused game makers?
Right now, it's more the latter still. Some of the big game studios have not gone the VR route yet. Activision, you mentioned, EA Sports, they've stayed away from VR just yet. Others have. Ubisoft, of course, major game studio, has done a lot of VR. Bethesda, which was recently bought by Microsoft, interestingly, big game developer and publisher, has done some VR, Fallout 4 VR, Skyrim VR. But for the most part, it's still smaller studios. So do I say smaller? Some of them now are big in their own right, but focused on VR. I mean, VR is its own medium. You can't just easily take an existing game like Call of Duty and say, okay, here's the VR version. That doesn't work. Good VR games need to be made for VR from the start. And so a lot of great VR games exist today that have their own big following. Games like Beat Saber, very popular. I think now 20 games or so have sold more than 1 million copies in VR, 20 VR games. So people are starting to make money in VR with their VR specific games. So a lot of these studios have grown and now are sizable and very well known and popular. But it's not yet per se that the big existing game studios, because hey, if you make Call of Duty, look, you can sell Call of Duty to 100 million PlayStation 4 players on day one, right? And VR doesn't have that size yet, and that's the limitation. But I think it's changing now with Oculus and Oculus Quest, Oculus Quest 2, the VR user base grows and grows and grows, and it becomes more and more interesting to make games for that medium. So it's just a matter of time until the big guys also start to focus on the VR medium.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Jan, I'm looking forward to watching some football games with you in the front row from a virtual reality experience. Maybe we'll go watch some Rice Owls or something like that, or the New Orleans Saints if it was up to me. But it's something tangential to gaming. How about entertainment? How about movies? We've seen IMAX where you've got directors like Christopher Nolan filming films in IMAX cameras because he wants to project those onto the IMAX screen. Are we starting to see any reception from production studios in movies for VR?
Yes, the answer is yes. It has been done. Some movies exist today. It's very hard. The struggle is how to do it well. It's not easy. It's a completely different medium. If you look at it, I'll just tell you an example why. If you look at a 2D screen, the director is completely in control of where you are looking. And he can make you look exactly where you need to look because you're just looking one directionally at a screen. If you're in VR, 360 degrees, what if you're looking to the left and an important thing is happening behind you? You missed it. Missed the biggest part of the movie. It's very hard. Storytelling in VR hasn't fully been figured out yet. Plus, it's expensive, and so there's challenges there. Ultimately, VR is good for interactive movies, and ultimately, in an interactive movie, what's the difference between an interactive movie and a video game? Is there a difference? Ultimately, you're back in the video game realm. So I think VR is best suited for full interactivity, full immersion, and let's go do things together. I don't just need to look at something as we're used to with watching a 2D screen for a movie.
So that's a perfect segue to a question I had to ask, Jan. Is Ready Player One, Ernest Cline, from Austin there, one of the pivotal books that then Steven Spielberg made into a movie. This is an immersive world that he envisioned where people actually have the oasis where they're interacting with other people. It's all completely virtual. I mean, what are your odds, Jan? Okay, so let's give you a 5-year time horizon. October 2025, we come back and we talk again. Has some company attempted to create an oasis of an immersive virtual reality world out there?
It's a great question. It's $1 $1 trillion question because most VR companies want to create that oasis. I mean, parts of the oasis exist today. Some of those social applications I mentioned, you can literally hang out in VR and meet up with your friends and family. One of our team members here, he has a brother at the other side of the country. He doesn't call his brother anymore. They just meet up in VR every day. And they meet up in this poker game, and they sit down at a poker table in VR and just throw down some cards and talk for half an hour. The notion that we're going to call somebody with a brick against our ear, that's going to feel quite outdated in the future. So look, parts of the Oasis exist today. The question is, will there be one world that seamlessly lets you do all these different things? I think the answer is yes. Will it be controlled by one entity? I don't think so. I think it's more like the internet, the World Wide Web. You can enter this virtual world. There's a lot of things to do, a lot of different games, applications, but they're not all controlled by the same company. It will come together in bits and pieces from different places. But ultimately, yes. Look, ultimately, I think people will spend a lot of time in VR, not just for gaming, but for social interactions, watching sports, whatever it may be. People will spend a lot of time in VR. It's a great medium, and it's becoming more and more mass market and mainstream. So that Oasis will basically be that VR world in which you spend a lot of time. And that is parts of that obviously exist today. A lot of people are spending a lot of time in VR today. So, yeah.
You were mentioning the hype cycle coming back around, so it's really starting to be the time for VR now. IDC, the research firm, agrees with you. They're expecting a 5-year compound annual growth rate for VR as a whole global industry to increase at 77% a year for the next 5 years. So that's a huge market that we have to pay attention to. I think it's worth $137 billion by 2024. A lot of their expectations are for the enterprise side of this. You mentioned interactive, just like a video game is interactive for you, there's opportunities, whether that's in simulations or industrial surveillance or anything like that, that they kind of think that there's an opportunity for that on the on the commercial side of that. Any thoughts on kind of, how Microsoft is developing the HoloLens and kind of all these different companies how they're approaching the commercial opportunity for VR or augmented reality too, AR as well?
Yeah, AR, definitely AR on the commercial side, on the enterprise side. I find AR to be quite different than VR. AR is basically, you're going to augment your existing reality. Microsoft HoloLens, Magic Leap didn't turn out to be as big as people thought it was going to be. Now also shifting to the enterprise market. I think AR has a great place in the enterprise market, where you can wear glasses and it augments your reality for whatever you need to do, whether you're picking stock in a warehouse or you're doing a medical surgery. VR, I think, is different because VR takes you out of the real world and puts you in a different world, which is the definition of entertainment. If I want to be entertained, I want to leave my existing world and put me in a new fantasy world, right? And so I think VR will have mostly applications in entertainment. Some non-entertainment as well, definitely. Education, very big. Training and simulation, which is related. We actually sold quite a few Omnis to the military agencies and contractors for training and simulation purposes. Oil and gas as well. Hey, let's do a training on an oil rig. Let's do that in VR. So education, training, and simulation is very big for VR because you can truly put people in an environment that would otherwise be too costly to build physically. So definitely lots of enterprise applications for VR. I think ultimately the consumer market for VR is bigger. I think so ultimately. But in the meantime, look, we focused on the enterprise market for the Omni for the last few years quite successfully. We've shipped over $10 million worth of product to that market. AR, I see more as an enterprise medium, less of a consumer medium.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like there's a lot of transition from the spend that companies are typically putting in today for travel, for whatever it is, in person or on-site experiences, and moving that virtually. It might be the opportunity for commercial side of it. Mm-hmm. Jan, a couple of years ago, I came out to your headquarters out there in Austin, Texas. I actually used the Virtuix Omni. It was awesome. It was quite the experience, I've got to say. That has been several years ago, and I know you guys have been up to a lot of exciting things since then. What is the game that if we buy the Omni that we have to try out, that's one of your favorites to play?
I think our most popular game in the commercial market is a game called Elite Force, and it's basically like Call of Duty. It's like playing Call of Duty, but you're in the game with your friends, running and gunning. I mean, it's incredible. If people like Call of Duty, imagine being inside that game and running around with your friends. And look, it's ultimately first-person shooters is among the most popular genres of gaming. But look, we try to offer something for everybody. We have kids games. We even have a game where you just walk around in nature and enjoy a nice nature environment. We have pirates games, scary games, haunted house, you name it. So we try to offer something for everybody.
Yeah, perfect. And then my last question is, our audience here at Seven Investing, mostly individual investors, we are very interested to see how this virtual reality market plays out. Is there anything that you think that we should be really paying attention to, especially if it's not obvious, or something that you would recommend us keeping our eye on?
I think the developments from by Facebook, the Oculus Quest, I think you'll see rapid traction there. I think PlayStation is going to come out with a new headset for the PlayStation 5. I think that will be quite successful. So you'll see a lot of these headsets, new headsets coming to market that will be successful. That will see a rapid uptick, much more so than a few years ago. And in our case, if your viewers are interested, I'll mention our own investment round we're doing today. It's a Reg A round on the Seed Invest platform. So now, thanks to Regulation A, a company like ours, we've raised over $20 million to date from investors, more Cuban VCs. Now, for the first time, we can also raise money from everyday investors. Don't have to be accredited anymore. So if people are interested, they can visit us on seedinvest.com and check out our investment campaign, and they can invest money in Virtuix as well if people want to have exposure to the growing VR market.
It's really neat, Jan. I'm really excited to see where you go with this, and also to follow all the progress you've made in recent years. Thanks so much for chatting here with me at Seven Investing this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Simon. Thank you for having me.
And thanks again for tuning in. We are here to empower you to invest in your future. We are Seven Investing. Okay, Jan, now if you're up for it, we actually got some questions submitted to our Seven Investing Twitter feed from our audience that they'd like to ask you about virtual reality. Are you game for taking a couple of questions from our audience?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. The first question comes from Tin Fook. Jan, he asks, which companies have adopted augmented reality for medical surgical procedures with some commercial success? Any thoughts on medical?
Yeah, I think Microsoft HoloLens has seen some activity and traction in the medical field, and then the second one, Magically, which we mentioned earlier, the latest news I read was that they were going to focus primarily on medical going forward. They had to scale back their ambitions quite a bit, and so they now are also, I believe, focused on the medical field for the application of AR.
Okay, great. Another question from the New Investor book. This is our buddy Max. He's asking, when will we see widespread adoption of AR, again, being used in engineering? I know we talked a little bit about engineering as an opportunity. Are we making some real progress in that field?
Yeah, and it's the same names. AR is right now being dominated primarily by Microsoft HoloLens. Other companies that were in the space have seen some setbacks. Magically, Meta is another one, actually had to fold. AR is inherently more difficult than VR, frankly. The VR medium is ready, products are great, consumer ready, obviously people are buying it and using it. AR is not there yet. Even HoloLens 2, it's not really ready yet for prime time. It's more still experimenting. People are trying to see what to use it for. So we're still a few years away, I believe, from AR being ready for the market, whether commercially or consumer.
Okay, great. Another one from Virtuix Stocks here saying that there's a lot of use cases that are out there. Do you have any ideas of publicly traded stock winners from the virtual reality trend? Now, of course, Virtuix is the one that we picked because that's the one that you work for, Jan, but any other companies that you just respect what they're doing out there in virtual reality world?
Yeah, I mean, there's few pure players, but the companies I mentioned before, Facebook, look, and VR is still a small part of what they do. So I don't think by investing in Virtuix, in Facebook, that you get complete exposure to VR. But I do respect what they do. I mean, I think they have a great product. They're very aggressive on pricing. As I mentioned before, they're basically building a complete monopoly in the consumer VR space, which I think is going to be very large. Mark Zuckerberg always wanted to have his own platform, which he didn't have. Facebook still today is just an app on other people's platform, which is a risk that he identified. So he always wanted to create his own platform. And that's why he bought Oculus 6 years ago. And I think he's succeeding. I think he truly will have an incredible VR platform that will be successful and have widespread adoption. So Facebook is a big one, and then the other public companies in the VR space are again, they're bigger companies that do some VR, but one is Sony with PlayStation VR. One is HP, which develops VR headsets. Quite good products, mainly commercial and enterprise focused, but doing that really well. And HTC is still one of the leaders in VR headsets today, and then I suspect they will continue to come out with new VR headsets going forward.
Yeah, that's great. And then the last one is from Jason Ricketts. He's saying, how many games from Activision Blizzard or Electronic Arts with these massive followings, which by the way have tens of millions of people playing FIFA soccer or playing, the Activision games right now, how many of these games could they possibly get on their platform to really drive gamers into virtual reality experiences as opposed to the existing ones on 2D screens? You talked a little bit about this earlier, Jan, but what do you think about these larger game makers going to virtual reality?
Yeah. Only a few have gone to virtual reality. The ones that you just mentioned, Activision and EA Sports, have not. EA Sports particularly, look, sports games are mainly from a third-person perspective, looking at a field. So it's hard to translate that to VR. You're not in a first-person perspective, which really that's really what VR is all about. And Activision also hasn't gone to VR just yet, but others have. Ubisoft, big game developer, Bethesda, just bought by Microsoft. Those, I think, are the two biggest ones that have dabbled with VR. But I do think that the bigger ones will start to focus on this VR medium.
Great. Jan, thanks very much for taking the questions from our 7 Investing audience.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.